production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Call to order the June 10th meeting of the Cary Town Council. I want to thank you for joining us from your homes this evening as we continue to follow the Governor's state of emergency orders. We are streaming tonight's meeting virtually. The majority of council is present with me here tonight. To meet the requirements of the remote meetings law, we have one council member participating remotely through WebEx, and that is Council Member Ed Urha. Mr. Urha, can you hear us? And thank you for joining us remotely.
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful.
All right, we now move to our ceremonial opening, and I'll recognize Councilmember Bush.
Thank you, Mayor. So first, I'd like to talk a few minutes about what's going on this month. I'd also like to thank Rashonda Harris for her presentation at the last meeting describing Juneteenth and its history. And this important day was also going to be marked now at our last council meeting, where we voted unanimously to recognize this day as an official town holiday. And as an official town holiday, our employees now get that day off. But since Juneteenth, the 19th, is on Saturday, that means that employees get the Friday off, June 18th. That doesn't mean that we won't be celebrating, and there are a number of great events for our town, for people in Cary and obviously our town employees to participate in. The first one is the Juneteenth Voices, which is on Wednesday the 16th. And this year, I'm excited to share that the Cary Arts Center will be lit up in red, yellow, green, and black, where there's no light, to represent the colors of Juneteenth. And that'll be lit up from June 18th through the 20th. And that will be to honor the heritage and the meaning of the day. And if you didn't know, which I didn't know, the colors actually have significant meaning, where red represents the noble blood that unites all of the African people and their ancestry, the black for obviously for the people, green for the rich land of Africa, and yellow, which joins all the colors in the traditional flag of Ethiopia, which has really influenced many flags in Pan-African communities. Then there'll be the Celebration of Freedom, which is an event at Ceremonial Amphitheater and Wellington Park on Juneteenth from 1 to 2:30. Also, we have a lot of events in June. We are also celebrating Pride Month. And this year for Pride Month, there's a virtual film screening all month. You can go online and watch it, called Ahead of the Curve. There's an in-person film screening and a panel of the movie Gay Chorus Deep South that follows the really famous San Francisco men's gay chorus as they do a tour of the South. And then after that, there'll be panelists and members and representatives from local chorus groups. And then again, we always like to light things up, so there'll be the rainbow colors on the Cary Arts Center, and I understand there'll be some really cool chalk art that'll be on the Cary Theater in concert with the event. So I do want to say that this is just a continuation of what we do here in Cary. We recognize the diversity of our community. It's a welcoming, I think Cary is a welcoming community where people live, work, play, and raise a family and own a business. And it's really important that we celebrate the equality and freedom and the value of recognizing everyone and their worth. And so with that, I ask that everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is to adopt the agenda. I would entertain a motion to do so.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call vote, starting with Councilmember Yerha.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem France.
Aye.
Councilmember Liu.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Bush.
Aye.
And I'll vote aye as well, and the motion is unanimous, and we do have an agenda. First up on the agenda is recognitions, reports, and presentations, and our first and only report is the manager's update. Mr. Stiegel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I'm going to provide what I hope will be my last pandemic update. Nearly all of our parks, recreation, and cultural resource facilities are set to reopen on Monday, June 14th. The only two exceptions to opening next week are the Hive and the Nature Center at Hemlock Bluffs. It shouldn't be too much longer for them either. Also, full-day summer camps are starting back next week at both Bond Park and Herbie Young Community Centers, which is really good news. Finally, we'll be reopening Town Hall to citizens in July, including offering in-person council meetings on July 22nd. Once we've settled on the exact Town Hall reopening date in July, I'll keep you advised. So Mayor, with staff and offices having coming back last week and town facilities opening up, it's starting to feel like Cary again. That concludes my report.
Yay. Thank you.
Thanks.
We now move to our next agenda item, Public Speaks Out. Instructions for submitting comments for our Public Speaks Out were attached to the posted agenda. Participants had the opportunity to send comments through email, the 311 online portal, and regular mail. So now I'll open up Public Speaks Out and call on the town clerk to summarize comments received and then call on any call-in speakers. Ms. Johnson.
Yes, we've received one written comment and no call-in speakers. That written comment was from Ashley Brown regarding the availability of parking at Dunham Park, requesting access to the parking that's being used as construction. And she's been put in touch with staff about this.
Very good. So I'll close the Public Speaks Out and we'll move on to the consent agenda. For the benefit of people watching our meeting on TV or online, I'll go through the consent agenda items. Please keep in mind that one vote approves all of these items. On the consent agenda, we have minutes, setting the public hearing for 21A08 Stanley Martin Homes LLC annexation, 20 REZ07 Arbors at Cary PDP and consistency statements, and auditor selection and contract award. Would council members like any of these items pulled for discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call vote. Councilmember Yerha.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem France.
Aye.
Councilmember Liu.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Bush.
Aye.
I'll vote aye, and the vote is unanimous. And we move on to our public hearings. Same rules apply for public hearings that applied for Public Speaks Out, except the speakers now have 5 minutes instead of 3 for their comments. Instructions for submitting comments for tonight's public hearing were included in the public hearing notices, and participants had the opportunity to send their comments through email, the 311 online portal, and regular mail, and all comments received before noon today were emailed to the council, and a printed copy was given to council members at tonight's meeting. Our first public hearing is on the recommended fiscal year 2022 budget. Financial Strategy Manager Stacy Tichy will present this item, and no action is requested from the council this evening, and it will return to us at a later meeting in June. Ms. Tichy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to introduce our second budget public hearing in preparation for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2021. The recommended budget includes authorization for operating and capital expenditures totaling $400.1 million. This total budget amount is 6.4% less than the prior budget. The operating budget, which supports the daily operations and services of Cary, increased 1.8% from the prior year. The recommended budget decreases the property tax rate by a half penny from 35 cents per every $100 of assessed valuation to 34.5 cents. The significant tax base growth realized in Wake County's property revaluation process last year, coupled with a strong local economy and sales tax gains this year, give us the ability to recommend this half penny decrease, which equates to approximately $1.7 million in revenue. This recommendation includes a $1 monthly solid waste recycling fee increase from $19.50 to $20.50 per month, bringing the program's cost recovery to 90%. The fiscal year 2022 recommended budget also includes utility rate changes, increasing utility bills by approximately 2.5%. The fiscal year 2022 recommended budget focuses on maintaining service levels and infrastructure while moving forward with shaping Cary's Tomorrow Bond and other major projects. This budget also maintains our employee count at just over 1,286 full-time employees. Funding is included within the budget for our nonprofit partners delivering services to our citizens. It has been Cary's practice to fund an amount equal to $1 per citizen for a pool of nonprofits that supplement Cary's cultural arts, and another pool of $1 per citizen for nonprofits that enhance other facets of Cary's quality of life. Based on a rounded estimated population of 172,000 on January 1st, the long-standing practice of financial support for each of these pools is included in the recommended budget. This meeting has been advertised as a public hearing specifically on this recommended budget. In addition, staff requests budget public input year-round. On a monthly basis, we have and will continue to prompt our citizens to share their thoughts and values about the budget through social media and the BUD newsletter. We provide multiple ways for citizens to tell us what they're thinking by email, phone, Twitter, or Facebook. Of course, citizens always have the opportunity to comment at any Public Speaks Out portion of your regular council meetings. Any citizen comments on the budget that come in by social media, email, or voicemail are shared with you in the quarterly reports throughout the year. We advertised this formal public hearing beginning May 28th, and today we've shared comments that arrived by noon since that advertisement. After the public hearing begins, I'll summarize those citizen comments, but before we start, I'll highlight where we are in the budget process. This evening's public hearing is the second opportunity for the public to share their thoughts on the fiscal year 2022 recommended budget. The first occurred during the May 27th regular council meeting, fulfilling statutory requirements. The schedule anticipates council budget adoption on June 24th to prepare for the new fiscal year beginning July 1st. Thank you for your attention to this crucial component of our fiscal management. Now is the time for the public hearing on the town's fiscal year 2022 budget.
Thank you, Ms. Teachy. And now it is the time for the public hearing, and I'll turn it back over to you to summarize any written comments you've received.
Thank you, Mayor. We received 4 comments via email and social media between May 28th and 12 noon today. These have been provided to you this evening. I'll now briefly summarize them before continuing with the public hearing. The comments received include 2 emails from nonprofits expressing appreciation for Cary's support, 1 email commenting on the recently approved Juneteenth holiday, 1 email commenting on the Juneteenth holiday and supporting the police department. This summarizes the comments received between May 28th and 12 noon today.
Thank you, Ms. Teachy, and I'll call on the town clerk to see if we have any call-in speakers for the public hearing.
No call-in speakers for this hearing.
All right, I'll close the public hearing and open it up to council members for questions or comments before we move to our next item.
I would just want to thank the staff for their extra efforts this year. It's obviously been very challenging with the pandemic and all, but to go above and beyond, I think, to reach out with social media and some of the things that I know I've seen, to try to solicit feedback on the budget. I think that was really special, and I just appreciate it.
And very well said. Considering all that's gone on and considering my years of experience with these two I'm looking at, we remember years when budgets would go to work session after work session after work session, and we don't see that anymore. And that's, I think staff staying well in tune to what we need and what we desire, what our citizens desire and where we're going. And it makes a huge difference. And that's why we're able to get through the budget process so quickly. So like Mayor Pro Tem said, thank you so much. And Ms. Teachy, please let the finance department know that, or budget know that we're so appreciative of all the work done. All right, we'll move to our second public hearing, which is item 5.2, and that's 21 REZ04 Wellington Park PDD Amendment Parcel C2. Planner Aaron Puckett will introduce the item. Council will not take action on this item tonight. It will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Advisory Board for their review and recommendation, and will come to us at a later date. Ms. Puckett.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. This is a request to rezone approximately 1 acre located at 301 Wellingborough Drive. The site is located at the northwest corner of Thurston Drive and Wellingborough Drive. Residential portions of Wellington Park surround the site to the north and east, and the Wellington Park Shopping Center is just south of the site. The Marla Durrell Park and Kids Together Playground are located about 500 feet to the west. This image shows the site's current conditions viewed from the intersection of Thurston and Wellingborough Drive, looking north. There are no overhead power lines located on the property. According to Cary's GIS, there are no stream buffers present on the site. Field determination of such features is required at time of development plan review. Staff also would like to note that drainage for this site flows to the southwest, joining up with a larger stream that flows south towards Lockmere. Both Thurston and Wellingborough Drives are collector avenues, and sidewalk is already existing along both of the property's frontages. The parcel is currently zoned Planned Development District Major, or PDD Major, and is in the Wellington Park PDD. It's currently zoned for a daycare use only, and the applicant now proposes to amend the PDD. The proposed amendment specifically modifies parcel C2 of the Wellington Park PDD. The original PDD zoned this parcel for a nursery school use, or what would be defined as a daycare under our current LDO, meaning that a daycare use could be developed today without need for a rezoning. The proposed amendment would change the use to office uses, including business or professional office, radio or TV broadcasting studio, and wellness center. Additional conditions include limiting the maximum building size to 10,000 square feet, limiting the building height to a maximum of 2 above-grade stories, limiting on-site light poles to a maximum height of 25 feet, which is 12 feet below the maximum allowed by the LDO, and providing a 30-foot wide Type A streetscape along the property frontage on both Thurston Drive and Wellingborough Drive. The original PDD proposed a 25-foot streetscape, but the 30-foot width matches the current LDO requirement. The Type A planting standard, however, is above the planting density that would otherwise be required for a non-residential use. The applicant also proposes one modification, which would be the ability to locate the building at the rear of the site, with parking in between the building and the road. The LDO typically requires buildings at intersections of thoroughfares or collectors to be located at the intersection. However, given the increased streetscape plantings, reduced light pole heights, and the location at the edge of a residential neighborhood, the modification could be justified. Although this request appears relatively straightforward, we do want to note that based on the highly attended neighborhood meeting and other comments we've received since that time, there are a number of concerns with this rezoning from nearby residents. And we understand that some of those concerns could be in part due to the fact that this parcel has been a vacant wooded lot for so many decades, despite the fact that it is currently designated for a non-residential use. And with this in mind, we wanted to clearly show the differences between the existing and the proposed development standards as a point of clarification. So as noted previously, the most substantial change is to the use, which can be built on the property. The site is currently permitted to develop as a daycare, as we mentioned, and the rezoning would change the use to those uses listed in our LDO's office category. In regards to these uses, I did want to note that one of the concerns we have heard is about the potential traffic this office use could create. Staff did research the trip generation for both medical office and daycare uses, And we found that a 10,000 square foot daycare had more than triple the number of peak hour trips of a 10,000 square foot medical office, both in the AM and PM peak hours. The existing zoning does not specifically limit size or the height, and we do note that a 2-story daycare is somewhat uncommon, but it could be allowed currently. The original PDD allowed a 25-foot non-residential streetscape along both frontages, which is 3 upper story and 5 understory trees per 100 linear feet, whereas the new proposal offers a 30-foot wide type A streetscape, or 4 upper story and 14 understory trees per 100 linear feet. Light pole height is currently allowed at the LDO standard, or up to 37 feet. And regarding the one modification, a daycare use today would be required to be located at the corner of the property with parking at the rear, unless it is at least 10 feet below the grade of the roadway. A preliminary analysis of the request against the Imagine Cary Community Plan finds that policies in the work and shape chapters apply. The rezoning for an office use could support several work chapter policies by helping provide a new location for an existing Cary business, but also by providing a location for a small office site in an area at the edge of an existing residential development and across the street from an existing shopping center. Regarding the shape chapter, this site would be infill development, being the last remaining undeveloped Wellington Park subdistrict, aside from the required open space. With the limitation on the number of stories and the light pole height and the proposed type A streetscape, this use could also provide a reasonable transition from adjacent residential uses and the shopping center to the south. The site is located in a traditional neighborhood in our future growth framework. Neighborhood commercial and small format commercial uses can be appropriate incidental uses in these areas. This location on the edge of a traditional neighborhood and adjacent to a commercial center could support a small non-residential use. A virtual neighborhood meeting was held in April, and 72 nearby property owners attended. They had questions and concerns regarding traffic and site access, drainage and environmental impacts, the width of the streetscapes, potential light impacts, the building height and design, concerns with potential underparking that could cause spillover onto neighborhood roads, and a desire to keep the property zoned for a daycare use rather than an office. After the neighborhood meeting, the applicant revised conditions in response to some of the citizen feedback. They added the condition to limit light pole height to 25 feet, and they increased the streetscape width from the 25-foot type A that they had initially proposed to a 30-foot wide type A streetscape. 5 emails were received since the neighborhood meeting, one with concerns regarding traffic impacts, one with concerns about site drainage, hours of operation, potential site access conflicts, and a general comment that office is not a good fit at this location, and one email also expressing traffic and safety concerns and a preference for a 1-story building. 2 emails were from citizens with questions about the public hearing date. And please note, this does not include the public hearing comments we received for tonight, which we will summarize during the public hearing portion. Staff mailed public hearing notification to property owners within 800 feet of the subject site, which exceeds both the state's and Cary's LDO requirements. And with that, this concludes my presentation, and following the applicant's comments and the public hearing, I'll be available for any questions. Danny Howell, the applicant's representative, is on the line to speak to this request, and Mr. Howell, you may begin.
Good evening, council members and staff. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on behalf of our request for a minor PDD amendment to the Wellington Park PDD, specifically parcel C2, located at 301 Wellington Drive. Thanks, Aaron, for the great overview of the project. Our request for PDD amendment stems from the current property's sole allowable proposed use as a nursery or daycare facility. Our client and applicant wish to bring their family dental practice to this community. The current plan is for their practice to occupy 4,000 to 5,000 square foot of the maximum 10,000 square foot 2-story building and lease remaining space to one of the proposed requested uses and our conditions that Aaron went over earlier. We had a very informative neighborhood meeting with our potential neighbors in early April, where we discussed a variety of topics, including but not limited to building height, architecture, vehicular and pedestrian traffic access points, perimeter and streetscape buffers, site lighting, impervious and stormwater, tenants, and parking. From these conversations, we elected to increase our entire streetscape buffer width from the current PDD required width of 25 foot to the LDO required 30-foot width, as well as increasing the planning intensity to a type A. There's also an additional 5-foot parking offset and 10-foot building setback from the 30-foot type A streetscape buffer to further provide additional buffer and screening from our roadway frontages. We also chose to reduce the allowable site lighting pole height to 25-foot max from the LDO allowable 37-foot height. In doing this, we hope that we have addressed topics brought up during our previous neighborhood meeting, and we look forward to moving our request forward. We thank you for your time, and the applicant would like to say a few quick words. Dr. Smith? I apologize, guys. Dr. Smith was on the line.
So no Dr. Smith on the line?
It shows him on the line. I apologize.
Sorry, we don't.
Smith?
Hey, Danny, you got me here?
Yes. Can everyone hear him now?
Yes.
Yep. Sorry about that.
Perfect.
Yeah. Aaron,
Dr.
thank you for the intro, and you know, to the HOA, I'd like to say we certainly understand that all this change can be concerning and, you know, even scary, and I'd want to know as much as possible about what's going to go on around the place that I call home too. So to that end, I can certainly empathize. I do want to point out that a small business does have the best interests of the community at heart. Here, our hope is to partner with you all, not to be a problem. And I welcome all comments and questions, and I certainly welcome all respectful exchange. What I don't welcome is calling my current office. I've had staff come to me recently that have had phone calls telling us to stay where we are. We don't want your office in our neighborhood. Things to that effect I don't have time for. To the council, I want to thank you guys for your time. I've spoke to a few of you guys one-on-one ahead of this. I've learned a great deal about how the town conducts its business, and I appreciate that. I have a great respect for the process. I don't want to tie up too much time rambling on, but we want to be a partner in all of this. So thank you guys all for hearing about our little project here.
Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Puckett?
That's all I have until the public hearing is open, Mayor.
All right, very good. Now's time for the public hearing for 21 REZ04 Wellington Park PDD Amendment Parcel C2. And I'll call on Ms. Puckett to summarize comments submitted.
Thank you. We did receive several written public hearing comments from 10 citizens, and those comments included the following. 5 comments expressed concerns with traffic or pedestrian safety impacts of the proposed use. 5 comments stated the property should be a residential use or open space. 4 comments voiced concerns with the building height, and 3 had concerns about the building aesthetics. 3 comments were in regards to potential noise impacts. 1 comment was regarding possible crime associated with a commercial use. 2 comments mentioned drainage concerns. 2 comments voiced a preference for the nursery school, which is allowed under the current zoning, and 1 comment noted concerns with lighting of the site. I'll also note that 1 citizen also emailed a copy of a change.org petition signed by 373 people opposing the rezoning, which did include individual names but no street addresses.
Thank you, Ms. Puckett. I'll now call on our town clerk to recognize any call-in speakers.
Yes, we have 4 call-in speakers tonight. Our first speaker is Suzanne. Suzanne, would you confirm you're the correct speaker by giving your name and address?
Yes, ma'am. Suzanne Puccio, 105 Kirkfield Drive.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, council members, for your service to our amazing town and for this hearing in public forum. We respectfully request no change to the current zoning for the property at the corner of Thurston Drive and Wellingborough Drive, which is the beginning of our neighborhood. In addition, the property's proximity to the very popular Marla Durrell Kids Together Park also represents potential safety and traffic issues. The residents of Wellington Park and Wellington Ridge oppose the rezoning request of a two-story office building in our neighborhood. Please take a moment to think about neighborhoods like Lockmere, Camden Forest, Brookstone, Preston, and Highcroft. None have a two-story office building. We welcome and encourage you to take a 5-minute drive to our neighborhood to see it from our perspective and see what our concern is, that this rezoning request is not appropriate. We have no issues with the current way the property is zoned for a daycare. That makes sense and would be useful to our residents. We have 268 single-family homes in Wellington Park and 186 condominiums in Wellington Ridge for a total of 454 residences. We have 264 of the 268 single-family homes who have signed their opposition to the rezoning. That's 98.5%. Additionally, another 111 Wellington Ridge residents have also joined the opposition with their signatures. With 375 signatures, we got a few more since I had sent the petition in, our petition represents about 83% of our residents. Obviously, this total reflects the community's strong disagreement to this rezoning request, and I'd like to now share some individual thoughts and perspectives from some of our residents to allow them to put their comments behind their signatures. One of our residents states, "The increased traffic flow will endanger not only the neighborhood children and pleasure walkers that frequent the route where the proposed building would be constructed on a daily basis, but the overly popular Marla Durrell Kids Together Park, a couple of 100 feet down the road, increased auto traffic will pose an imminent danger to our youth." Another one of our residents stated, "I live within a half mile of here, and I agree the building would be out of place and generate unwelcome additional traffic." Another resident stated, "We are losing the reason that many of us moved here, for peace and quiet, natural beauty, especially Wake County and Cary." Another resident stated, "A two-story office of this scale proposed will be very visible from homes and out of scale for the current building in the area." Another resident stated, "A building of this size and use is not appropriate for this location. Several housing communities and a community park adjoin the location. The additional traffic would be dangerous for the residents and park goers." Another resident stated, "We oppose a two-story building on this site since it is situated between a kids' park and a residential area. I am also not clear on why we need another medical building considering the large medical park across from us on Cary Parkway that appears to have several empty spaces and another dental practice already in our Lowe's Food Plaza." And lastly, one of our residents stated, "Wellington Park residents firmly oppose this structure. It's a quiet, small neighborhood and would have no benefit with this business, only disruption. It was 100% not needed or wanted." As you see, the overall theme is the same. The neighborhood has voiced its opinion. This is not an appropriate place for a two-story office building with a radio or TV broadcasting studio with transmission towers and satellite dishes. The initial zoning for this property was part of every resident's reason for choosing to live in Wellington. We believe the initial planning and zoning set forth by the town of Cary was absolutely correct and see no reason for this proposed change, nor would our community benefit from anything that is proposed in this office building. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lynn. Lynn, would you identify yourself as the correct speaker by giving your name and address?
Yes, thanks. My name is Lynn Yendo, and I live at 310 West Kirkfield Drive.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you again to the board for the time, Suzanne, your share. I'd like to introduce myself. I am a board member and treasurer of the Wellington Park Homeowners Association. I've lived in Wellington Park since 1987. My house was the second house that was built on West Kirkfield Drive. I have served on our board for many years, including the very first years after the developer passed the HOA to the homeowners. During the early years of our development, we had the opportunity to discuss the design and the amenities of our neighborhood with the developer. At our request, the developer put in tennis courts, a sizable pool, and a baby pool, which we still maintain, and the clubhouse was refurbished. Where land was not to be used for housing, we discussed with the developer and were given descriptions of what might be built. At the time I moved into my home in 1987, we expected a daycare center to be built on the property on the corner. We also expected a Town of Cary Park. My children are now 26 and 30, and one of them is a police officer in Durham, I'm very proud to say. I would have loved that daycare if it had ever arrived. The Kids Together Park, which is now Mara Doyle's Park, arrived when my kids were in middle school. A bit late for us, but a wonderful place for our kids in our neighborhood. We understand that times change, but that is exactly what zoning is for, so that all property owners can plan for a long-term future in all of our neighborhoods. Today, our HOA has 268 families and so many children. Our families are always out on our sidewalks. This summer, we've had bikes riding to the swimming pool, and the tennis courts are open. Pedestrian traffic is very high on Wellingborough, Thurston, and Forest Parkway every day, but very much so in the later evenings as folks walk to get ice cream or dinner in the Wellington Park shopping plaza. Our only path for our children is to the local park or to the shopping plaza uses the sidewalks in front of this parcel. Even today, that corner is a bit dangerous with more traffic cutting through to avoid the light at Tryon and Cary Parkway. I fear for all of our families with traffic in a parking lot exiting through our walkways. I believe the zoning established in the 1980s has been very successful in creating a vibrant, self-sustaining, livable community. Our homeowners have seen their property values appreciate, and we are always a neighborhood in demand. So after more than 30 years, why are we looking at changing the use planned for this parcel? Unlike what was said earlier, we have always expected this to be developed, even though it's been set out there as a little bit of forest for a long time. We've been waiting. Our neighborhood would love to have a daycare center, and I think we've been proven to be quite patient in waiting for the right development to proceed. We have no illusions that nothing will ever show up on the corner. All we ask is that it be in keeping with the promise made to all of us over the last 30 years that it would be a good fit with our neighborhood. Nothing provided us would make us believe this is any fit for our neighborhood at all. Hence, the unanimity of response of our homeowners' request and the signatures in opposition on the petition provided. The proposal as provided is not in keeping with the neighborhood character. The only person who believes this is a fit for our neighborhood does not live in our neighborhood. The rest of us are united that this is not a fit. On behalf of the homeowners of Wellington Park and Wellington Ridge, and on behalf of the board, I sincerely request the Town of Cary reject this requested change. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think I heard you.
Our next speaker is Vincent. Vincent, would you confirm you're the correct speaker by giving your name and address?
Yes, Vincent Penrose, 100 Kirkville Drive.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Good evening, everyone. So I live on the corner right across from the proposed area on 100 Kirkville Drive, and I know the area very well. So during COVID, like most people, I have been working from my office, which is in the front of my house. So I have a great vantage point of all the activity that happens in this area. I see many kids in the area because there's a school bus that's right in front of where the proposal is going to be. There's families walking to the park. There's families walking their dogs. There's people exercising, and then other just general runners and walkers in this area. This intersection is already hard to cross as a driver, but more so as a pedestrian. Adding a two-story building will add additional traffic at all times of the day. Plus, there is a proposed driveway leading out to Wellingborough where there is no crosswalk and a bend in the street, which will make it way more hard or difficult to turn and to cross. We also have a 5-month-old, and walking this area is already difficult and dangerous, especially at night. We already have to walk in the street with a stroller just to get to the sidewalk, and then adding a two-story building and traffic would add to the struggle of walking to the park because that would be on that sidewalk area that we're going to have to cross every single time going down to the park. And not to mention the bus stop that our daughter will use as she gets older. Will also, crossing the street, we'll have to cross that daily, with the extra traffic. At least if this were a daycare, the traffic would be limited to weekdays and certain hours and would be of value for my household and others in the neighborhood who have kids. Also, that is what was planned for, and I do not see enough evidence that shows we need an office building and additional dentist office in the area. Aside from the safety, there's also the aesthetic of our neighborhood. This is the corner as you first enter our neighborhood, and seeing a two-story building is not what my family or my neighbors want to see. I have not seen other neighborhoods in Cary that are greeted by a two-story building. I have to ask the council members, is this something that you would like at the entrance of your neighborhood? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Bruce. Bruce, would you give your name and address to confirm you're the correct speaker?
Yes, can you hear me? Am I off mute?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bruce Kalos, 311 West Kirkfield Drive, Cary.
Please proceed.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Town of Cary Council for providing our HOA with the opportunity to make this presentation. Similar to Lynn, I'm also a resident. My family has been resident for 30 years on the same house and the same street. Without getting into any more of those details that Lynn listed, I would like to contribute to the discussion by listing some additional details that some of the residents have mentioned. As was stated during early April 2021, a virtual meeting was held with TOC representatives and site engineering contractors for parcel C1. Where a number of critical issues were discussed. Items potentially impacting Wellington Park included, but were not limited to, such things as square footage of facility, minimal parking, hard surface ratios, vegetation buffers, setbacks, and also a concern among the residents for flooding, proper drainage, and stormwater retention, especially since that 1.08 acres is about the highest spot on that whole undeveloped area in there that's several acres in addition to that. Homeowners were also assured by TOC reps and contractors that all the features of the current zoning ordinance requirements that made the existing usage of a daycare facility generally acceptable could be maintained, and I think there's been some explanation of that already. It was only the usage that was really being changed. That indicated usage was referred to as a dentist office. And has a conceptual design, as we're talking about all these details, has a conceptual design or site plan or layout been generated and evaluated by the Planning and Zoning Board in conjunction with some of these concerns that you've heard tonight. Compounding the issue of usage for other than a daycare center is the lack of definition of the newly identified categories. I think this is one of the key principles here. Wellington Park residents need to know exactly what a wellness center or a broadcasting studio encompass. Both these types of facilities could have more expansive scope than is implied in or limited by any wording of the document. For example, many possible types of wellness centers exist. Is a wellness center a doctor's office, a physical rehab center, or a gym, all of which could accommodate dozens of staff and customers at any given time and be open as much or more than 12 hours a day, 7 days a week? The same is also true for a broadcasting studio with even a greater potential for a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week mandated operation schedule. Additionally, what would the limitations be on associated support and operational equipment such as broadcasting trucks? Where would they be parked? Microwave antennas and dishes? Will they be able to extend above the height? Some of this has been covered, but these are some of the key factors again. What is the maximum auxiliary combined emergency generator output capacity which would be needed to maintain as a critical key element for a broadcasting studio? And if that were permitted on site? We're not talking your little Generac in the backyard now. You're talking somewhere in the tens of thousands of kilowatt hours to keep a broadcasting studio online. All of this will reside only about 100 feet from the property lines of Wellington Park residents with no defined 30-foot streetscape required in the border of our backyards. It covers the front yards or the front portion of the facility, but not the back portion, and that's a slope downhill for rain drainage. Compound this with the increased traffic and the utilization of the streets, already impacted by the gas stations, the shopping centers, Piney Plains cut-throughs, and recreational park, currently without the benefit, and this is the key point to that concern, currently without the benefit of a single traffic light at any of the 3 existing major connections in that area. Concerns such as these certainly contribute to our anxiety. This much broader scope of allowed uses, considering that the potential occupant petitioning the rezoning request is a dentist, it seems to indicate that that 10,000 square foot building is not going to be used just as a dentist office when you look at that request. It's also a question I would have that if I was going to be taking that facility, how would clientele that are going to visit that facility going to react when the front door is looking right up the loading docks and dumpsters of the shopping center directly across the street? That's no negative on the shopping center. We knew that was going to be there. We knew that's how it's functioning.
I'm sorry to have to interrupt you, but your 5 minutes has expired. I apologize.
Can I get just one more paragraph in here?
No, sir. We don't allow that. You can make one final comment, one sentence to close.
Okay, I think we ought to urge the TOC to delay additional consideration until it can be given to the size and layout of the site and detailed public discussion on the impact can be conducted. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
No other speakers.
All right, I'll close the public hearing. I want to thank all of our public speakers for participating. I want to tell you about the process. This is going to be several months long. It'll next go to an advisory board of citizens called the Planning and Zoning Board, and their task is to review this compared with the Cary Community Plan, which was created by Cary citizens and not the council. And they will decide whether or not they believe it matches the plan, and then they'll make a recommendation to council. Staff will also review how this proposal matches the Cary Community Plan, and will also have a recommendation before it comes back to council. It's likely to come back to council in 2 or 3 months. Between that time, every meeting the council has, you can speak at Public Speaks Out, even though this was the public hearing. You can also contact us by email, and you can certainly contact staff. Aaron Puckett is your contact for the staff, and ask any questions, make any comments you would like. And we welcome that. We really want you to participate in this process, and we really want you to be involved and help us determine the outcome of this proposal. Having said that, I took a lot of notes, and I'm going to take my first stab at what I heard and try to make some comments, then I'm going to turn it over to my council members. One thing I heard over and over was traffic, and I believe the traffic comparison was made with what's there today, which is nothing, compared to an office building. And I think that's unfair because you have to compare it to a daycare center. And staff in their report said that's 3 times the amount of traffic. That's what you have to compare it to. That's how I look at that, and that's a very important point. Another important point I thought was the aesthetics that was mentioned several times. Type A buffer used to be called an opaque buffer. Did we get away from opaque buffer? But that's what it used to be called. Ms. Puckett, can you help me on that? Is it an opaque buffer still, or is it just called type A buffer?
We just use the term type A buffer because technically, even as dense as you plant them, that buffer will never be entirely opaque.
Okay.
So we've gotten away from that term because we thought it was misleading.
Okay, but it is the strongest buffer we have, I believe. I think it's safe to say that. I also heard comments about flooding. Any proposal now requires mitigation of any water run off that site, much more so than it did 30 years ago. These residents that we're talking about, they've been there 30-something years. Back then, we didn't have any requirements or very little. And so some residents, actually I know some in Wellington, homes were built in floodplains, would not be allowed today. Well, we've made a lot of progress in that area. So flooding issues actually get better with development now than not with development. I heard, why are we having a medical building when all these medical buildings are proposed? You know, that's frustrating for me sometimes. I remember years ago complaining about drugstores on every corner. Like, why are you allowing that? Because it's their right. The property owner has the right to develop their property. And we can't say no to the right of what they want to develop. We can say yes or no to the type of what they are wanting to develop. And that's what we're trying to decide. Is it right to build an office building, or is it, should we leave it to be a daycare? That's going to be our decision, not whether it can be a medical office or not. But I understand your frustration, but that's not our decision. I think this is another question for Aaron. I heard comments about the height, and I'm thinking about the height with the daycare. And I remember the chart you had up, and I'm trying to remember if daycare didn't have a maximum or could have a bigger maximum than what's the office is proposed. Is that correct?
Correct. So the daycare currently entitled for that piece of property, there's no cap on the square footage or the height, except that it would be regulated by the LDO, which is going to be between 35 and 50 feet, depending on, it's kind of right at that cusp of perhaps being within 100 feet of a residential district where they could get the extra height. We're aware that a two-story daycare is somewhat uncommon, but they're not unheard of. We actually have one recently approved in Cary and another under development plan review currently. So two-story daycares do exist, and that would be permitted under the current zoning.
Thank you, Ms. Puckett. And the reason I keep going back to this daycare, they can build this tomorrow, and we can't stop it. That's not a council decision. So that's the way we have to think. We have to think what's allowed now and what could be allowed in the future. Also heard questions about transmission towers. Was that a condition? Ms. Puckett, I guess I'm asking you again. Is that a condition? If not, we might want to ask the applicant to address that in the future, not right now.
Yes, so it is not currently a condition. I will, however, also note that any towers associated with a radio or television broadcasting use does require a special use permit. So that would not be permitted by right, even if this were rezoned to include that use. The applicant is aware that that use has come up in discussion and may be willing to offer some additional conditions. He may be able to answer that if you'd like him to speak further on it, but no, it's not currently a condition, but special use permit is required for towers.
Okay, thank you. And that would be a concern of mine. The other comment I heard sort of related to that was generators. Those would be allowed, I assume. And if they want to offer,
yes.
Yeah, if they
There's
want to.
nothing that I'm aware of that would prevent those. They'd be subject to all of our screening requirements and things of that nature.
And that would be important to me as well when we're talking about those potential problems. Hours of use, I don't know if it's legal when we're talking about a type of use for an applicant to offer a condition on the hours of use. I heard that comment made. I'll look at our attorney.
Those are very hard to enforce as zoning conditions, so we don't usually recommend those.
Right, and so the person that was asking about the site plan review and all of those types of things, what happens in the process? Once the type of use is decided, then the staff is the one that works on the site plan review. That's not a council decision. So that's when they would talk about the hours of use, what the buildings would look like, and et cetera. And I know that might be frustrating if this is the first time you're working on that. Also, one last thing I wrote down was somebody talked about traffic lights. I can tell you I live less than a mile from there, so does Jack Smith, and we feel your pain with the traffic, but traffic lights are controlled, or the decision to allow traffic lights are controlled by NCDOT, and I know they do have, one in particular is, I don't know, 50, 60 feet from a traffic light. I don't think they'll ever allow that.
No.
So We can't control that. We feel your pain. Jack and I drive it every day. But traffic lights are determined by NCDOT, and a lot of it has to do on line of sight, how close they are to the other traffic lights, and so on and so on. And so that's why you don't see certain traffic lights. What you might see if conditions got bad is they change it from a full access left and right to a right turn only, and that would make life much more miserable, but it would be safer. So that's a potential of what we might see in the future. But anyway, those are all the comments I caught, and I was writing them down. I know my colleagues were as well. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues so they can capture anything I've missed. Who would like to go next?
I think you covered very well.
Yeah, I only have one question. With regards to the gentleman who spoke with, on the sidewalks, and Ms. Bucket, maybe you can direct us, should there be a new building put there, there would be a sidewalk actually put in as a requirement of that development. So I believe the missing sidewalk link is on one side or maybe both sides of the street.
I thought it was already there in front of the development on both sides, I think.
Well, he talked about a missing link.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know where that missing link was. Ms. Bucket, do you know where that is?
There is existing sidewalk along both of this property's frontages. I do believe on the opposite side of Wellingborough Drive, there is a missing segment there.
Okay. I hope that maybe staff can take a look at that and see that as we move forward with this sidewalk
We can.
gaps. Maybe we can do something to make that safer. And also maybe we could take a look at if there are, it's a very good point. There's a lot of people from that neighborhood crossing over to go to Marla Durrell. If we can make that safer,
Yes.
Regardless of how this goes, I think that would be
Yeah.
a win-win.
That's a great point. Yep, absolutely.
In all the comments, all the emails, I've only heard two concerns that I think are valid or have merit to me anyways. One, you've already spoken to, need better definition and/or efforts from the applicant regarding broadcast studio, and I think wellness center was also brought up. I think we
that's a
do.
good one. I forgot that
We
one.
need a better understanding of what that could be. So if the applicant and our staff can help us as that goes through the process, but I think most of what you spoke about was good. And then the only other one I think was architecture. And I guess a question for Ms. Puckett is, has the applicant offered anything in regards to architecture or any efforts to try to make it blend into the neighborhood? Because I keep hearing 2 stories and 2-story building and whatever, and I think darn near every house in the neighborhood is 2 stories. So I don't get that, I'm sorry. But if it's a square box and nothing but glass, then yes, that's out of character. But if it even has some type of residential feel to it or something, similar to some of the offices along Cary Parkway over by Preston, the dentist offices and things over there, I think that could be helpful. Traffic's not a concern of mine compared to what could be built today. I think they've done pretty well in regards to lighting, dropping the boxes. I guess I would want to make sure that's not a safety concern. I mean, there's a reason we have them so high is to cast enough light. You spoke to flooding and stormwater. I think they've done good with the buffer. Crime is absolutely not a concern of mine. So I need a little more info on architecture and broadcast studio and wellness center.
Okay. Other comments, questions?
I'll just say ditto to everything you said, Mayor, and you said, Don. I totally agree. Just a little bit more clarity about what those uses mean, and then the architecture would be great.
Mr. Smith, you live close to there.
Yeah, you live a mile. I live a little bit closer than that. and sometimes when I'm brave, I actually cross that light and walk over there. And Marla Durrell is getting very busy, and there is a parking problem. So, sidewalks and anything else, it's probably a good time that we revisit some of those things also. In fairness to the Wellington folks that signed the petition, that they are landlocked somewhat. They've gone through in those 30 years quite a lot of changes. And I don't want to relate it to combat fatigue, but they've heard over the years a lot of good stories about development, and we've had situations out there where once approved, the land gets flipped, bought by someone else. So my advice would be to echo your comments without repeating all of your comments without repeating. The more that the applicant can put conditions on, that person has to just look at what their intent is and what they want to do. And full disclosure, I've talked to some Wellington residents, and in fairness, I did talk to this applicant. That just comes with the territory so that you hear all perspectives. So I think it's important when you see things like radio and TV and the wellness, I think some serious thought should be given to what the conditions are. And you talk about two-story buildings, as you said, Mayor, the entrance to Lockmere has Fonville Morrissey, but you don't think of it as an office because the architecture looks just like a house. So you don't get that glaring contrast that you were talking about, Mr. France, about like maybe a rectangular all-glass building. So I do think there's some work there on the applicant's part to really firm up some of those conditions, because then if the land would be flipped or sold, those conditions follow that property and that zoning. And then just in fairness, that area has had so many of these little spot zonings around them, and they have one in particular behind them, not on this front end where this is, but on the end, was flipped. And then, because some of those conditions were promises and they weren't part of the code, you don't get what you were promised.
And that's why we like conditions.
That's right. That's right. So, I'm just trying to make the point that, if the reason for 2 stories is, and the intent, as was explained to me, would hopefully be a comparable business that complements dentistry, I think some thought should be given to the applicant about maybe what he could do to strengthen those conditions to give some peace of mind if in fact this gets approved.
Okay.
Can I just add one thing? When I said I'd like to have a little bit more context about the architecture, I don't necessarily want this building to look like a house. That's not at all what I intend. There are a lot of examples of office buildings going on or being built at the entrance of a neighborhood. For example, Weston Estates had pretty much the most gorgeous building I've ever seen put right at its entrance. I mean, I love it. And it really enhances the neighborhood. It certainly doesn't degrade the neighborhood at all. I'd just like to have some understanding, if this is going to go in so close to homes, what is the architecture going to look like? And, is it going to complement the community?
And just a clarification for those that may be listening in for the first time to one of these hearings, when we are talking about conditions, these have to be voluntary. We cannot require conditions. The applicant has to volunteer conditions, and we vote on what is proposed, not what we'd like to see, as Mr. Smith pointed out, because promises, they can flip and they don't mean anything. So we've learned that over the year. We've got over 100 years of experience on this council, so you're not going to see a council member believe in promises no matter how nice the person may be. We're going to go with conditions. So anybody else? Mr. Urha?
No, I agree with everything that you've been saying. To show you how wrong I am, I thought when I first saw this, it was going to be a simple one. Certainly never expected a petition with 300 and some names on it. Obviously, the applicant needs to continue working with the neighborhood. Architectural conditions would be wonderful, although, again, honestly, I don't know if anything is going to get community buy-in on this one. Nursery school or daycare, whatever you want to call it, has been on paper there for 33 years. 2 generations have gone by and we still only have it on paper. So I think we have to take that into consideration also. An active dental office may be more beneficial to the neighborhood if done right than a nursery school on paper. My concern primarily is with those additional uses too. The broadcasting studio just seems a little odd. So we need to have more information on that, but I guess we'll see as time goes on.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Uraha. As I mentioned earlier, this will go to the Planning and Zoning Board, and they'll review that probably within a month or two, and we'll probably see it in 3 to 4 months, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 to 4 months. So there's plenty of time to ask questions for those that have been watching this, and I want to thank you again for speaking, and I recommend you follow this all the way. If you were unsure about anything, please let us know, and we'll let you know about the process, let you know what we know. And
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
I feel it's important to just kind of add an additional thought based on Mr. Uraha's comments, and that is all of these neighborhoods are getting new residents, and you know, as we see in Lockmere, and I'm sure you all have your own examples of where you live, you know, all of my neighbors now have little kids, and so you know, the idea of there may not have been a daycare center there for many years, 30 years. I just want to make sure people understand that based on the demographics of what's moving into that area, that may be a need that resurfaces in the future. I just wanted to make that for clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anything else before we move on? All right. We'll move to, thank you, Ms. Puckett. We'll move to our third public hearing, 20 REZ 11, which is 3890 North Carolina 55 Highway rezoning. And once again, Aaron Puckett will introduce the item. Council will not take action on this rezoning tonight, and will once again refer it to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and their comments and recommendation. And it will return to us at a future meeting. Ms. Puckett.
Thank you again, Mayor. This is a request to rezone 1.89 acres located at 3890 NC 55 Highway. The subject property is located on the east side of NC 55, south of its intersection with Indian Wells Road. The Blakely subdivision is across NC 55 to the west, and the Carpenter Historic District is across the railroad to the east of this site. This image shows the site's current conditions looking north on NC 55 with the site on the right. There are no overhead power lines located on the property. According to Cary's GIS, there are no stream buffers present on the site, but again, field determination of these features is required at time of development plan review. NC 55 Highway is a 4-lane median divided thoroughfare, and sidewalk will be required on the east side of the road. Go Triangle Route 311 serves NC 55 directly adjacent to the subject property. A potential bus stop location will be analyzed during development plan review. According to the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan, a future streetside trail is proposed on the western side of NC 55, and the future Village Trail Greenway traverses properties to the east through the Carpenter area. The site is currently zoned Office Research and Development Conditional Use, and the applicant proposes rezoning the site to General Commercial Conditional Use. The applicant also proposes the following zoning conditions. Use shall be limited to a grocery store with a maximum size of 10,000 square feet. The maximum height shall be 2 stories at 35 feet maximum, and a 20-foot type B buffer shall be provided along the eastern property line adjacent to the railroad, and the standard LDO shrub spacing of 8 feet maximum shall be reduced to 5 feet. This exceeds the LDO required planting standard. The height and buffer conditions were offered with the previous rezoning case for ORDCU, and so they're simply being retained with this new request. As a comparison to the previous case, a number of commercial and light industrial uses are permitted under the existing zoning. This would include things like motor vehicle sales, hotels, kennels, parking lots, and decks as standalone uses, light manufacturing and warehousing, among other uses. In a preliminary analysis of the request against the Imagine Cary Community Plan, policies in the work and shape chapters were found to be most applicable. Rezoning for the proposed grocery store at a maximum size of 10,000 square feet could help support a small business. Most big box grocery stores in Cary range from around 30,000 to over 50,000 square feet, so this size would likely only support a smaller specialty grocer. The small site near a number of residential neighborhoods could be an appropriate location for such a use. Regarding the shape chapter, the site is an infill property bounded by NC 55 and the railroad to the west and east respectively. A Bojangles is approved for the site directly to the north with a building permit in review. The newly constructed public storage is located to the south with one vacant parcel in between it and the subject site. The small grocery store would also provide an appropriate use transition between these other non-residential uses. The small site and surrounding development context also makes this a reasonable location for a small commercial use outside of a designated commercial center. The site is located in the historic Carpenter Special Planning Area on the Future Growth Framework, specifically in the mixed non-residential corridor. This area supports office and commercial uses complementary to the Crossroads Village to the east. Screening of development from properties to the east is encouraged, and smaller scale buildings with a maximum height of 2 stories are recommended. The use of the site as a small grocery store could potentially be more consistent with these recommendations than some of the uses currently allowed under the existing zoning, such as a number of those permitted light industrial uses. A virtual neighborhood meeting was held in April, and approximately 20 nearby residents attended. The primary concerns were about traffic, especially at the intersection of NC 55 and Morrisville Carpenter Road. Some of the attendees expressed an interest in the grocery store use, with some expressing a desire for a pedestrian crossing for residents on the west side of NC 55 to be able to access the future store. Staff have received 3 emails since the neighborhood meeting. One was simply looking for the meeting minutes. One citizen had concerns with existing noise from NC 55 and how the proposed use might exacerbate this. And one citizen felt there are already plenty of grocery stores in the area. 2 of these emails also both expressed concerns with traffic. And again, this does not include the public hearing comments, which you might hear this evening. Staff mailed public hearing notification to property owners within 800 feet of the subject site, and that exceeds both the state and Cary's LDO requirements. And this concludes my presentation. So again, following the applicant's comments and the public hearing, I'm available for any questions. Brendy Vega, the applicant's representative, is on the line to speak to the request. And Ms. Vega, you may begin.
Thank you, Erin. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Brendy Vega. My address is 115 McKeenan Drive, Cary, North Carolina. I am the private sector planning director with Withers Ravenel, and here on behalf of the applicants, Zivyesh Patel and Ashish Tripathi. As Erin already mentioned, we are seeking a rezoning to this parcel to change to a district that permits grocery. With this change, we are limiting the use to grocery and will limit the size to 10,000 square feet. This request will keep the previous zoning conditions, but will be more restrictive with the limit to the permitted uses. We do understand that there are concerns regarding traffic, pedestrian connectivity, and another grocery store. To address some of these concerns, I'll point out that the already approved Eagles gas station on the corner and the adjacent Bojangles will have shared cross-access to this site. The shared access will continue to the south, and therefore this site itself does not have direct access to 55. The use of a shared driveway with cross-access improves safety by reducing the number of points where vehicles will enter or leave 55. Due to the location of this site, we do recognize that it is difficult to have pedestrian connectivity. Being between a railroad corridor and 55 makes it challenging to pedestrians. However, we will provide internal pedestrian connections in the event that there is a future potential for connections from Morrisville Carpenter Road. The specialty grocery store proposed on this site carries items that one cannot generally find in a Wegmans, Harris Teeter, or Publix. Mr. Patel recently opened an Indian grocery store in Morrisville where they not only carry groceries but have prepared food. This grocery store will be similar to their current location. They chose this location due to the distance from other grocery stores in the area. Residents in this area travel 3 to 5 miles to the nearest Indian grocery store, and this location will provide this community with something closer. And finally, the rezoning request does remove many permitted uses that may not be as desirable or compatible with the residences to the east, such as a kennel indoor or outdoor. And we feel that this grocery store is compatible and replaces what was originally planned here, which was Atlantic Tire. So with that, we do ask for your support, and thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Puckett, anything else before I proceed?
No, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Now it's time for the public hearing for 20 RZ 11, which is at 3890 North Carolina 55 Highway rezoning. And I'll once again call on Ms. Puckett to summarize any submitted comments.
And Mayor, we did not receive any written comments for this public hearing this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Puckett. Ms. Johnson, do we have any call-in speakers?
No call-in speakers.
All right. I'll close the public hearing and open it up to council members for questions or comments. Ms. Robinson?
Thank you so much. One thing I like about this is that it is narrowing down the permitted uses for the site. So I think that's very positive. I have a lot of sensitivity about this particular area of 55. I'm kind of concerned that we're going to start getting that fractured look that other roads like, Capitol Boulevard and whatnot have, where you have, gas station, fast food, grocery. I want to make sure that it somehow ties together so that it looks cohesive and it doesn't look disjointed. One thing that I also have a concern about is the corridor for the rail right behind it. If anybody's ever taken the train through Cary, through downtown Cary, you can see that Cary doesn't always look its best from the rail corridor. And right now, this is a commercial line, but it may not be a commercial line forever. And so I want to make sure that, we don't just stick the ugly side to the rail corridor and perpetuate this problem of having ugly things next to rail. So any conditions that they might be able to offer regarding screening or locating their trash receptacles, because I know that's a big deal with grocery stores. There's a lot of, trash waste that happens. Anything they can do to ensure that it's going to look attractive on all 4 sides of the building would be really good. And again, any conditions that can be entered in that might be able to address how this is going to be cohesive with a Bojangles and a gas station. I know, which I'm going to tell you, still breaks my heart. I cannot, not loving that right next to our historic area.
Other questions or comments? I'll ask one question. We hear comments about a specialty store, but that's not a condition. Is that correct, Ms. Puckett?
That's correct. It would not be a condition. The only condition is grocery store. We're just aware that this 10,000 square feet is considerably smaller than your typical chain grocery store.
But it could be anything, even though.
Are they allowed to sell prepared food in a grocery store, or do they have to get special permission to have prepared food?
Yeah. No, they all do.
They all do? Okay.
It does, one other question or highlight. I think the internal connection between those properties is great because if you're walking that way, you won't have to walk all the way out and back and, along the highway, which isn't allowed. And also, if you were making a left turn off of Morrisville onto, or Indian Wells, as it's called on the other side, to try to get to this property, that internal connection is really important. So I'm glad they all thought about that.
It's awful helpful if you want to stop and get gas and then hit the grocery store and then grab Bojangles on the way home.
It's like
This
it
is like
was
Dawn's
made to
paradise
be.
right here.
It's a win-win.
Yes, I'm hungry.
Dawn sees no problem with this whatsoever.
You do raise a good point, though, about, looking our best from the side of the railroad. I mean, we're going to have more and more train traffic in the future as time goes on, and that's a valid concern. We've ridden the train to, Charlotte and some other places and stuff, and it's an interesting view.
Yeah,
Not just Cary.
not just Cary.
You know,
There's a lot of places that look interesting from the rail. Yeah.
I will say Cary's backside probably looks a lot better than most other places, but, so, yeah, I don't have any concerns with the use. I mean, but I do think Ms. Robinson raises a valid point. I'd like to learn more about that.
Okay. Unless there are no other comments, this will go to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation, and we will see it in a few months.
I'm sorry, can I ask one question?
Absolutely.
When this comes back to us, could our staff address the pedestrian crossing across 55? I know we have a couple grade-separated crossings that already exist, but not really super close to this spot. And grade-separated crossings are crazy expensive, so I'm not asking staff to go and start proposing that. But if they can help us understand what that crossing, at-grade crossing, is going to be there at Indian Wells, that's going to be safe for people, help them feel like they're comfortable crossing, because it's a big road.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't want
We
to.
can follow up on that, Jennifer.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Our fourth public hearing, thank you, Ms. Puckett. Our fourth public hearing is 21A09 Amerly Alston LLC annexation. Associate Planning Director Deborah Grannon will introduce the item, and council will not take action on this annexation, and it will return to us at a future meeting. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. This first request for annexation is for 9 parcels comprising 18.7 acres located on the north side of Alston Avenue, approximately 600 feet southeast of the intersection with O'Calley Chapel Road. The annexation includes approximately 1.3 acres of intervening area. In this case, that is the adjacent area within Alston Avenue. The property is contiguous to Cary's corporate limits. In 2019, the properties were rezoned to mixed-use district and are subject to an associated preliminary development plan. The associated annexation has a development plan that proposes 330 multifamily dwelling units and 41 townhomes. The plan is currently in review and may be approved administratively once staff determines that it meets all applicable requirements of the Land Development Ordinance. And in accordance with the ordinance, the properties must be annexed before the development plan can be approved. Following the public hearing, staff recommends that council defer final action on the annexation to a future meeting. This concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for your questions following the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon. Now's the time for the public hearing for 21A09 Amerly Alston LLC annexation. I'll call on Ms. Grannon once again to summarize any submitted comments.
Thank you, Mayor. There were no comments submitted for this request.
Very good. I'll call on our town clerk to see if there are any call-in speakers.
No call-in speakers.
No call-in speakers. I'll close the public hearing and open it up to council members for questions or comments. Seeing none, we'll see this at a future date, and we'll move along to our next public hearing. 21A10 Sutherland and Gooch annexation. Associate Planning Director Deborah Grannon will once again introduce the item. We will not take action, and it will return to us at a future meeting. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you. This second request is for approximately 60 acres consisting of 3 parcels of land located at 9648, 9708, and 9716 Morrisville Parkway, approximately 600 feet southwest of the intersection with Weldon Ridge Boulevard. The area is contiguous to Cary's corporate limits. The properties are zoned transitional residential conditional use based on a rezoning case that was approved in May of 2020. The request is associated with a development plan that proposes to subdivide this assemblage for development of 108 age-restricted detached dwellings and 34 townhomes. The plan is in review and, based on provisions of the LDO, can be approved administratively by staff once we determine it meets the LDO requirements. And again, in accordance with the LDO, the property must be annexed before we can approve that development plan. Following the public hearing, we recommend that you defer action on the annexation to a future meeting. This concludes our presentation. And again, please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon. Now's the time for the public hearing for 21A10 Sutherland and Gooch annexation, and I'll call on Ms. Grannon to see if there were any submitted comments.
No comments were submitted, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, I'll call on our town clerk to see if there are any call-in speakers.
No call-in speakers.
All right, we'll close the public hearing, open it up to council members for questions or comments. Seeing none, we'll see this at a future meeting. Thank you, Ms. Granite. We now move to discussion items, and our first discussion item is conveyance of surplus police K-9. Police Captain Robert Cary, first-time presenter, welcome, Captain, will present this item and council may take action. Captain Cary. I like that. That's a good ring.
I know.
Right?
Captain Cary.
First-time presenter, long-time listener.
Yes. Well, good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Robert Cary. I'm a Field Operations Bureau Commander with the Police Department. The purpose of this presentation is to request your consideration to give the surplus police K-9 via conveyance to the town of Holly Springs Police Department. As you know, the town of Cary has a long history of providing support and equipment to the citizens of other communities and by helping equip other local governments. In April of 2019, the town authorized the sale of 2 surplus fire trucks that had reached the end of their useful service life to Guilford Technical Community College and to the Nashville Fire Department as a cost-effective solution to the community college's training program and to a community with lower service demands. This month, K-9 handler Scott McInerney will retire with over 26 years of dedicated law enforcement service. Officer McInerney and his K-9 partner Burkeen have faithfully served the citizens of Cary since K-9 Burkeen became Officer McInerney's partner in the summer of 2017. K-9 Burkeen is named in honor of fallen Shelby, North Carolina police K-9 handler Tim Burkeen, who lost his life in service to his community in 2016. The conveyance of K-9 Burkeen to the town of Holly Springs allows the opportunity to partner Burkeen with an experienced K-9 handler and trainer who is serving in an administrative role and whose remaining service years will align with Burkeen's remaining useful service life as a police K-9. It will also allow our police department flexibility to diversify our K-9 program's capabilities to better align with the 2040 community plan. Finally, it will allow K-9 Burkeen to continue to serve the community faithfully. Staff recommends that council adopt the attached resolution authorizing the conveyance of governmental property and gift Burkeen to the town of Holly Springs. We respectfully request your help with ensuring K-9 Burkeen is given the opportunity to faithfully provide support through his service to the town of Holly Springs. Thank you, and I will be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Captain Cary. Yeah, I think you laid it out pretty good. The handler is retiring before the dog. So the dog's got a couple of more years of service, and we're going to put him to good use by giving him to or handing them over to our good friends in Holly Springs so they can put him to good use. So questions or comments or a motion?
I guess I just have one question. Does that leave us without any K-9 unit at all, or do we have another dog, or do we, if we have the need, we just call Holly Springs up and they bring?
Ooh, that's a good question. I asked that.
Oh, yeah, we're not going to be
We
reliant on
currently
Holly
have
Springs.
2 other K-9s.
Yeah.
With 2 others, okay. Great.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Captain.
Could you imagine us calling Holly Springs, right?
Yes.
Other questions or comments or a
Well,
motion?
I think I also understood that with Burkeen going to Holly Springs, we will actually be acquiring a new
Yep.
K-9 that may actually have some even other skills that might be more useful for us, so.
Okay.
And a younger K-9, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call vote starting with Councilmember Yerha.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem France.
Aye.
Councilmember Lou.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
Councilmember Bush.
Aye.
I vote aye, and the vote is unanimous. Thank you, Captain Cary, for the report, and thanks, congratulations on your first time. All right, we now move to our last discussion item. It is a downtown park funding request from, and we'll have the PRCR Director, Doug McRaney, and he'll present this item, and we may take action on this item. Mr. McRaney.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is with great excitement that we present one of the final steps to fully implementing the downtown park. It was designed to strengthen Cary's identity, to unify and energize the downtown, and to leverage economic investment in the downtown. The Downtown Park Phase 2 plan, developed by OJB Landscape Architecture, is now under construction. The incorporation of specific elements and material costs require an additional $15 million for project completion. I showed this slide 2 years ago at the retreat and at the time when the council approved the master plan for the park project. And at the time, it was 148 years in the making. And of course, it's 2 years later. And I thought it was only fitting to kind of repeat that at this time as a reminder, because at that time, when we called this the 150 years in the making, it was after a presentation done by Ted Boyd, where he went over kind of the history of Cary, pointing out the critical decisions that were made that made Cary what it is. And it's only fitting here in the sesquicentennial, and the year that we're celebrating that, that you, Council, get to join that tradition in making a great decision that will change Cary and be part of all the prior great decisions. Like the decision to build the Page Walker Hotel, the decision to build the first public school in North Carolina, along with all the other decisions that have made Cary what it is. And so I just wanted to make this as kind of a reminder and put in context the importance of this decision that you've made about investing in this park in downtown Cary. But before we make any final approval, let us take a quick review in how we got to this place. And while the planning for the park has taken over 20 years, I actually believe it started much earlier. Here is a hand-drawn map of downtown Cary at the turn of the century. At the southern end of Academy, you can see the red rectangle, which is Cary's public school, constructed in 1907, but notice within the red dashed circle where the current park is under construction, and that this area is labeled Park. It was owned by a Ben Savage, and it appears that the local residents viewed this property, this land, as an informal park. In addition, although we haven't confirmed it yet, but the naming of Park Street appears that it could very well have been based on the view of this land as a park. And so I present this to suggest that this location was potentially destined to be a park over 120 years ago. But it wasn't until 100 years later in 2000 that this land was formally identified as a future park. And from that point, it took 20 years. And what is amazing is that despite the passing of 2 decades, the town leadership, and most importantly, you as an elected body, were unwavering in your support for the park. During the first decade, most of the effort went towards purchasing the property. Next was the development of the first phase of the park, along with the streetscape improvements, the library, and adjacent parking deck. And of course, this final phase involving the hiring of OJB landscape architects, completing the master plan, and initiating construction. During the 20 years of planning of the park, there were 4 formal plans approved by council. There were numerous other unofficial renderings and plans, but only 4 approved plans. And while on the surface they all look different, what is surprising is upon closer inspection, there are a number of similarities with the current park plan under construction. And of course, the current construction is based on the approved plan by OJB Landscape Architects. The good news is the project remains on schedule. Council was told that the park would be under construction by the summer of 2021, and it currently is. And we're still on target to be completed the summer of 2023. In our recent discussions with our contractor, there is the possibility that some sections of the park will be completed before 2023. If so, we'll consider opening them, and it'll be important for staff to get their feet wet in managing portions of the park before the entire park opens in 2023. But we'll take a wait and see attitude and have a better idea a year from now regarding the progress of construction, and of course, council will be informed of that before it happens. And of course, the groundbreaking for the park is scheduled for June 26th. And I would urge citizens to check the project website, because we'll have a whole series of events scheduled for the week of June 21st, leading up to the 26th. And on the 26th, the actual groundbreaking will be at 11 a.m. And at 2 p.m., we'll have a detailed presentation of the future park by our consulting team, which will be at the Cary Art Center. A little bit about the numbers. Over the past 2 years, as the design of the park progressed, staff has worked hard to stay within budget. Unfortunately, the impact of the pandemic on the supply chain and material and labor costs has affected the cost to construct the park. In addition, to ensure the vision of this park being iconic and transformative in the downtown as well as Cary as a whole, additional features were added, resulting in the need for an additional $15 million. Now, talking about total budget costs, we're looking at $9.3 million for design and consultant fees, and for construction, it's now at $53.1 million. And our owner direct costs, contingency, public art, things like furniture and equipment, a whole series of different things at $6.5 million, for a total projected cost of $68.9 million. And so staff recommends that council appropriate $10 million in 2019 Shaping Cary's Tomorrow bond referendum funds and $5 million of general fund balance to the Downtown Park Phase 2 project. And I'll answer any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Mr. McGraney. As far as the extra costs go, the materials we're seeing, if you've gone to Home Depot or Lowe's, try to buy a piece of lumber or something, it's just crazy how much price of materials are going up. So I totally get that. And I totally get that staff has, and the consultants have planned this very well. So the 10 million of this overrun will come from the bonds, and 5 million comes from our budget, which is designed to be flexible to handle issues exactly like this. So we've really budgeted for this, and Cary designed this park to be the best of the best. We didn't design this park to be okay, and if we have some overruns, we're going to start cutting. That is not what this park is about. This park is designed to be the best it can possibly be, and I'm going to enthusiastically support this park being the best it can be, and will not support any cuts in this park. So I enthusiastically support the staff's recommendation, and I hope my colleagues do as well, and I think they will. Because this is going to be the crown jewel in our downtown for many, many years, decades. I don't know how long. People will be talking about this park for a long, long time.
For 150 years.
For 150 more years. That's right. Other questions, comments, or motion?
I mean, I'll just, tag on to what you said. I mean, some of it is construction costs. Obviously, with inflation these days, everything has gotten more expensive. I mean, I know our grocery bill's up 60-70%, so that's an issue. Some of it's, our own fault. We've made some adds to the project as it's gone through. I think Ms. Robinson's idea for that building was fantastic.
It's not your fault. We all agreed to it.
No, we all loved it. It was your idea.
Just got called out for that one.
Were you under the $10 million? Okay.
It was great. No, it really adds value to the park. It really does.
Let's hope so.
It does.
No, and a lot of that was citizen.
I'm just waiting.
You might wait a long time. Go ahead.
Okay. But, as you said, I mean, our staff, this council, and everybody does a good job at conservative budgeting and having a healthy fund balance. So when issues like this arise, we can respond to them. And, I mean, even this year's budget, we're still reducing taxes,
That's a good point.
So it's, we're not having to raise taxes to pay for this. We're actually cutting taxes to pay for this, and pay for this. I'm excited about it, overly excited. Been waiting for this for a long time. But no, it's This is going to be one of the premier parks in the southeast, if not the country. And, you know, when I joked 150 years, it's good.
I'm not going to doubt you.
Absolutely. This thing's going to be iconic. So, yeah, I support it. It's kind of tough. I mean, I was joking the other day with during the agenda meeting when we went to Boston to meet with OJB and, you know, kind of go over some things, and they were saying, you know, 50 million, and I'm like, you're sure 50 million, right? This is not going to go up, right? Oh, no, this is going to be 50 million, and yeah, here we are. So it's kind of a bitter pill to swallow, but I'm going to swallow it.
I think you have to think of it, it's not a spending increase, it's an investment increase. And we've made that commitment. It's a destination park. It is designed to fuel the energy of the development around it. And all of this is done in full transparency, full openness, full citizen feedback. Maybe 12 people out there were missing all that, I don't know. But the point is, you know, this has been done in such a participative way. And a lot of those add-ons are not just your building, but they're also the citizen feedback we got. So it's just natural. You know, like you said, you know, I think the message we want to convey is we take any investment seriously. We know this is a big amount, but in context of the investment made and where we're going, it just fits. And I think most people that have followed that understand that, and particularly anybody that is trying to do any home improvement or anything else with the costs that are going up. It's just, we live in strange times.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah, I would add to that, Jack, that we have visited a lot of other communities that have made big investments in public spaces like this. And I remember going to Scottsdale, Jack, with you 16 years ago probably, and they were talking about for every dollar that they invest in these public spaces, how many dollars in investment happen from the private sector. And we can already see that happening in our downtown. This is sparking investment in our downtown. And I'm hopeful and expectant that our staff is tracking that investment so that someday we can turn around to those that come to Cary and look at our public investment and say, what was that, you know, private investment that you got? What was the dollar for dollar that you got? And we'll be able to tell them.
We visited many places. I remember Greenville.
Love Greenville.
They did a lot of great things, and I asked the mayor, how did you do this? He said, you have to have a backbone.
Yeah, political will.
You have to be committed.
That's what Bill Coleman, our past manager, was talking about with this exact site. He said, you guys, if you're going to do it, you have to have political will to get it done. And that's kind of what we're being challenged with today, is the political will to pursue that vision in spite of the cost overruns.
Other comments, questions?
A couple observations.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm glad that Councilmember Robinson brought that up, because what's really fascinating about the investment that has occurred because of the park, I mean, it's very hard to prove causation, but certainly there's correlation. And what has been so what is another reason why Cary, I find Cary to be so endearing, is all that investment's occurred, but you're not approving it till tonight. And so that was based upon our citizens' belief in this government. And I mean, to me, that's remarkable. All the investment that has come anticipating a park that wasn't approved yet by the council, but based upon this government's history and its connection with the citizens, that investment was being made anyway. I don't think I haven't seen that anywhere else I have worked. And I find that to be really remarkable. And I think we're ensuring the citizens' trust by building them a park that they'll be able to be proud of for a long, long time. As far as the costs are concerned, yeah, it's always a concern when costs are going up. But the other thing that we know is if your construction costs are up, that means the economy is great. And so our property tax revenue is also way up, conversely. And unfortunately, we're not going to be in an environment where construction costs are the same and our economy is growing everywhere else. So you have to kind of take both ends of that. And certainly we've seen that in our growth of our property tax revenue. So.
And there have been times in this town where we've actually beaten budget. The Cary Art Center actually came in $3 million under.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I'm confident this one will. Right, Doug?
The park is not built yet, but you see homeowners and builders, they already advertise the park. And you see
Yeah.
pictures on Zillow and on these
Yeah.
real estate websites.
Yeah.
Citizens are very excited, and overwhelmingly, we got the support for the bond, and we got over 70% approval, right? So I think the citizens will be very excited to see we make this park a reality without taking any cuts.
Mr. Urha, I don't want to leave you out. If you have anything you'd like to say.
No, I certainly support the recommendation, agree with what you've said. Just want to make sure with the $10 million coming from the bond referendum funds, I believe I read in the staff report, that this is not compromising any of the other projects that were intended to use that bond money.
That is correct. It is
That's
not.
correct.
It is not. It does not.
Perfect.
Are we ready for a motion?
Well, I was just going to make, I think I was the only one that didn't make a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought everybody.
All for one, one for all. And I also support this. I think one of the things that I've noticed over the past couple of weeks, now that the fountain has been closed, is that people are really upset that the fountain was closed. And for me, it was actually, as sad as it is, it was somewhat heartening that everyone loves it so much that closing it became such a, a worrisome activity. And it's coming back, and it'll be better and more beautiful than it was before because it'll have a park behind it that'll even enhance the beauty of it. But I think that gave me a little bit of a feeling that, we are on the right track. People do like it. There is not a day that I don't walk downtown and see, last week I counted, there were over 100 people I passed just going to get a drink at the pharmacy on my way from my house to the pharmacy and back. I can't remember a time there were that many people downtown at 6 or 7 o'clock at night.
And when you were elected,
since this park was started.
when you were elected at 6, 7 o'clock at night,
Exactly.
zero.
Yeah. It is
Nobody
really,
did.
this is really spurring a lot of economic development. And this is just an additional, as Councilmember Smith said, just an additional investment.
All right, we ready for a motion?
So with that, I'll make a motion that we appropriate $10 million of 2019 Shaping Cary's Tomorrow bond referendum funds and $5 million of the general fund balance to the Downtown Park Phase 2 project.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Further discussion. The only thing, Mr. McRaney, you've teased us now that portions might be open early. I'm really excited that might happen.
Yeah, that'll be discussed with me later, trust me.
No pressure, Doug.
Yeah.
All right, roll call vote. Mr. Urha.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Friend.
Aye.
Councilmember Lou.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Bush.
Aye.
I vote aye, and the vote is unanimous. That is the end of the regular agenda, and now we will go into closed session, and I'll call on Ms. Bush for a motion.
Pursuant to GS 143-318-11A1, 3, and 6, I move that we hold a closed session to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of one or more individual contributors, prospective public officers or employees, consult with attorneys employed by and or retained by the town in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the town, and to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to GS 143-318-10E.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Further discussion. All in favor with a roll call vote, Councilmember Urha.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem France.
Aye.
Councilmember Lou.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith. Aye. Councilmember Bush.
Aye.
I vote aye, and we now go into motion is unanimous, and we now go into closed session. reconvene the council meeting at this time. We have no other business this evening, so I declare this meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.